I was halfway through my morning coffee, staring out at the rolling fields of Northwood County in upstate New York, when my phone buzzed with an urgent call. My name is Mark Wilson, and I've held many titles: father, neighbor, and most recently, county commissioner. But on that brisk autumn day, I was caught off guard by a single piece of news that would change everything. "Mark, you need to see what they've done to your grandparents' estate," my cousin Bridget whispered through the line. Her tone, normally so calm, trembled. "They've already sold off parcels. There are bulldozers and construction crews all over the orchard." I nearly dropped my mug. The porcelain clanked against the desk, sending black coffee sloshing. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, heart pounding. The estate she mentioned was a piece of land nestled at the edge of the county, a sprawling acreage that my grandparents tended for decades. After they passed, the land transitioned into a trust under my name. It was a place I'd always intended to restore and preserve, but life got busy. I started a political career, moved into a modest home near the county seat, and visited the estate only on rare weekends. I had no idea that someone else had been plotting to transform it entirely. Bridget took a shaky breath. "The Hawthorne Point HOA has put up signs saying Grand Oak Meadows, 30 exclusive mansions for discerning buyers. They're clearing trees and digging foundations. Locals say the HOA claims they have full authorization." Her words rattled me. The Hawthorne Point HOA was infamous for overreach. I'd received countless constituent complaints about their borderline extortionate fines and bizarre community rules. But this was a new low, acquiring farmland that didn't belong to them and building multi-million-dollar mansions on it. "Hang tight," I told Bridget. "I'm on my way." 20 minutes later, I was speeding down the old country road that led to my grandparents' estate. Autumn leaves littered the pavement, their rich golds and reds contrasting sharply with the churning anger in my gut. The air was crisp, the sky a bright sapphire blue. It could have been a beautiful drive, but all I felt was dread. My mind whirled. How had the HOA gotten hold of the land? Were they forging documents, bribing officials? And why hadn't I heard about any development permits in that area? A swirl of dust rose up as I turned onto the gravel path that once led to the main farmhouse. But the farmhouse itself was gone, replaced by the skeleton frames of towering mansions, half-built and teeming with construction crews. The orchard my grandmother had nurtured for her famous pies, bulldozed into wide dirt patches, littered with cement mixers and lumber piles. My chest tightened. I could almost hear her voice scolding me for letting this happen. I parked and jumped out. Dust clung to my boots as I strode forward. A sign soared high, emblazoned with fancy script: Grand Oak Meadows, presented by Hawthorne Point HOA. My hands curled into fists at the name. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. Suddenly, a woman in a tailored gray suit stepped out from behind a partially constructed column. She held a clipboard, phone in hand, and exuded an air of calm authority. "I'm sorry," she said, voice smooth as silk, "but you'll have to leave. This is a private construction site." That was the first time I laid eyes on Cynthia Pierce, the newly elected president of Hawthorne Point HOA. She was tall, elegant, with piercing hazel eyes and a commanding presence. Her polished look contrasted starkly with the swirling dust and chaotic hume of construction equipment. I took a measured breath, fighting the urge to reveal my official position as county commissioner right away. I'd spent years regulating land use and approving building permits, but something told me to keep that quiet. "You're building on land that belongs to my family," I managed, voice low. "I see no record of a sale, and I certainly didn't authorize any mansion development." Cynthia's lips curled into a chilly half-smile. "Is that so? We have all the necessary papers, I assure you. If you have concerns, take it up with our legal department." She offered me a business card. I stared at it. The bold letters reading, Hawthorne Point HOA, Cynthia Pierce, President. My blood boiled, but I forced a calm front. "I intend to," I replied, pocketing the card. My mind raced as I left the site, ignoring the stares of construction workers. This wasn't some minor land dispute. They'd already sunk serious capital into building 30 giant mansions. If Cynthia claimed she had the paperwork, she must have filed it under the radar. Somehow, bypassing my direct oversight at the county level. Back in my truck, heart pounding, I dialed the county assessor's office. "Tina," I said to the clerk who answered, "pull everything you have on property transfers related to the old Wilson estate. I need them immediately." As I drove off, the roar of bulldozers echoed behind me. I felt a strange sense of foreboding and a tiny spark of excitement. They clearly didn't realize who I was or what I could do to unravel their scheme. My grandparents taught me never to pick a fight I couldn't finish, but they also taught me to stand firm against bullies. And from the looks of it, Cynthia Pierce and her overreaching HOA were about to learn exactly how resolute I could be. That evening, I locked myself in my home office, poring over scanned documents that Tina from the assessor's office had emailed. I found a suspicious deed transfer dated 6 months prior. It claimed that Mark Wilson, rightful heir, relinquished all interest in the estate, granting full ownership to a shell company. Then, that shell company sold the estate to Hawthorne Point HOA at a fraction of the land's market value. I scrolled down to the signature line, my eyes narrowing. The scrawl supposedly read M. Wilson, but it looked nothing like my handwriting. The pen strokes were shaky, uneven. Anger surged through me. This was blatant forgery, someone forging my name to transfer my grandparents' estate. In the margin, I noticed the notary's stamp. Seth Lockhart, Notary Public. The date next to his signature fell on a weekend I was out of state, attending a county commissioner's conference. No way I'd signed anything. My heart pounded as I realized the depth of the fraud. A sinking feeling invaded my chest. Forging a signature is no small offense, but forging a signature that effectively steals farmland is an even bigger crime. I was furious at the audacity, yet a calculating part of me recognized an opportunity. The HOA had no clue about my role as commissioner, since I'd only been elected a few months earlier. They must have started this scheme assuming I was just some absent heir. Now I wondered if I could use that to my advantage. Still, I needed more than just a suspicious signature. I needed ironclad proof of wrongdoing, documentation, witness statements, anything to show that Cynthia Pierce and her HOA cronies orchestrated this. I copied everything to a flash drive, adding my own notes. Then I glanced at the time, nearly midnight. My phone buzzed with a text from Abigail Reyes, a local lawyer who specialized in property disputes. I'd shot her a quick message earlier, asking for a consult. "Mark, if you can prove the signature is forged, we can file an injunction to halt construction immediately. But be prepared for a fight. This HOA is known to have powerful allies in real estate." Abigail. I stared at the text, a rush of determination coursing through me. A fight was precisely what I intended to give them. But first, I needed to figure out how deeply this corruption ran. Before bed, I remembered my grandparents' old safe, hidden in the estate's caretaker's cottage. Grandpa used it to store original property records, everything from dusty deeds to detailed boundary surveys. If it was still untouched, I might find documents to confirm the estate's rightful ownership, along with any disclaimers forbidding its sale. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind spinning with strategies and half-formed plans to expose Cynthia's wrongdoing. The next morning, I rose at dawn and drove back toward the estate. I wanted to avoid run-ins with the construction crews, so I parked behind a grove of tall pines, away from the main site. Autumn sunlight filtered through branches, casting long shadows across the orchard's remnants. My footsteps felt heavy as I approached the caretaker's cottage, a small, weather-worn building that had once been a cozy home for the family's hired hand. I peered in through the dusty window, no sign of life. The door was locked, but I found the spare key hidden under a loose brick, just as Grandpa used to keep it. Inside, I flipped a light switch, but the bulbs remained dark. They must have cut off the power. Nonetheless, I pulled out a flashlight, sweeping it over the old kitchen, the living room, a few scattered chairs. The caretaker's cottage smelled musty, like the hush of a place abandoned for too long. but my memory guided me to the small back room. There, behind a battered bookshelf, was the safe. A wave of nostalgia hit me. I remembered Grandpa muttering about keeping everything in one spot in case the world goes sideways. If only he knew how sideways things had gone. The safe's combination was the date of my grandparents' wedding: 0612195. I pressed the numbers into the dial, heart pounding with each click. A final turn and the safe door creaked open. Inside, I found a stack of yellowing papers secured in a folder. Flicking through them, I recognized the official deed from 1952, the boundary surveys, and a will from my grandfather specifying that no part of the estate could be sold without explicit written consent from me, his sole grandson. My breath caught at the thoroughness of these documents. They left no wiggle room for a third party to claim the land. Even if I had wanted to sell, I'd have needed to follow strict guidelines. The forged deed that the HOA brandished was worthless in light of these older, ironclad records. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Cousin Bridget. Went by the site this morning. Construction's in full swing. They're pouring foundations. Hurry. I stuffed the documents into a bag and hurried out. A flicker of movement caught my eye through the cottage's grimy window. I froze. Outside, a tall figure in a hard hat was scanning the area as if searching for trespassers. I slipped out the back door, heart hammering, and ducked behind a fence until he moved on. This was no time for a confrontation. Not yet. Safely back at my truck, I reviewed the caretaker's documents and felt a surge of hope. With these original deeds and Grandpa's will, plus an expert to verify the forged signature, I could blow this case wide open. But the cunning side of me whispered, "Don't rush. Let the HOA dig themselves deeper. Let them build more, invest more, reveal more of their shady deals. Because once I made my move, I wanted it to be a checkmate they never saw coming." A cold breeze ruffled my jacket as I scanned the half-built mansions in the distance. They looked so imposing, so sure of themselves, and yet they were all standing on stolen ground. A resolute calm washed over me. I'd learned from years of political negotiation that timing was everything. The Hawthorne Point HOA had no idea that the new county commissioner, whose sign-off they needed for final occupancy permits, was the same man they thought they'd defrauded. They'd built 30 massive houses, all set to market for millions, believing the land was theirs. It was time to prepare the perfect trap. And watch them walk right into it. That afternoon, I drove straight to Reyes and Burke Law Firm, where my friend and attorney, Abigail Reyes, practiced. I slid the caretaker's documents across her desk, including Grandpa's original will and the boundary surveys that explicitly forbade unauthorized sale. Her eyes widened. "This is priceless, Mark. Exactly what we need," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Combined with your proof of forgery, we can file an injunction. Construction could halt within 48 hours. I exhaled. I'm tempted, but I have a different plan in mind, one that might yield a more permanent resolution. I explained my idea. Let the HOA continue to build, sink even more money into the project, and then strike with a legal action so comprehensive it would annihilate any defense. In my position as commissioner, I can quietly request final inspections and occupancy permits. The moment they try to finalize the sale of these mansions, they'll need my signature." Abigail's brow furrowed. "That's risky. If they suspect you, they might rush to close deals in some shady manner, or try to push the county board to override you." "They can try," I replied with a wry smile, "but the board respects me, and we have enough evidence to keep them from pulling any swift moves. Meanwhile, no buyer in their right mind will pay millions for a mansion if the property title is under legal dispute." My eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. "I'll orchestrate a scenario where they're cornered, no path out except to admit their fraud." Abigail tapped her pen against the table. "Just be prepared. Cynthia Pierce is rumored to have deep connections, local developers, maybe even a state senator. She's not some ordinary HOA president. I nodded. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, and fall she will, once we bring the weight of truth and the law down on her. My jaw tightened. The key is to keep a low profile, let them assume I'm powerless, and strike at the perfect moment. Abigail sat back, a spark of admiration in her eyes. All right, Commissioner. I'll gather more evidence, talk to the notary who apparently verified your signature, see if he'll crack under pressure. You focus on the county side, maybe even find a reason to expedite or intensify the final permit checks. We shared a firm handshake. Outside, the sky had turned a threatening gray, and a strong wind battered the flags flying in front of the courthouse. An apt metaphor for the storm brewing around the Hawthorne Point HOA. Because while they continued leveling the ground and erecting lavish homes, I was building a case. One that would dismantle their scheme. Days turned into weeks. The speed of construction was astonishing. One by one, the skeleton frames of those 30 mansions took shape, soon boasting brick facades, gleaming windows, and manicured lawns that replaced the orchard's sacred soil. Each time I passed by, my heart wrenched at the sight of uprooted trees and flattened meadows, but I maintained my composure, letting them march deeper into their pit of wrongdoing. Meanwhile, rumors spread through Northwood County that something was amiss. Some locals questioned how the HOA got permission to build so many mansions on farmland that supposedly belonged to some Wilson family. Others noticed that no official notice had been posted about rezoning the estate for residential use. Whispers reached me that Cynthia Pierce insisted they had special clearance. Even the county commissioners started asking me pointed questions. Mark, do you know anything about this project? I played my role carefully, feigning polite curiosity while disguising my personal stake. I've heard it's an HOA development, I'd say with a shrug. I'll look into the permitting details soon. But inside, every new rumor fueled my resolve. One chilly afternoon, I dropped by the local diner for a quick bite, scanning a newspaper that featured a glowing article about Grand Oak Meadows. The piece read, "A new wave of luxury living is coming to Northwood County. 30 lavish estates nestled in a pristine setting. HOA President Cynthia Pierce promises a top-tier community with first-class amenities." My blood simmered at the phrase pristine setting, which actually meant bulldozed orchard, the nerve of them touting it as some idyllic paradise while ignoring the rightful owner. A voice interrupted my thoughts. "Commissioner Wilson, mind if I join you?" I looked up to see Jim Hawkins, a local reporter. He was known for sniffing out controversies. I motioned for him to sit. He sipped his coffee, eyeing me. Word on the street is that the Grand Oak Meadows project has questionable origins. The Hawthorne Point HOA is hush-hush about how they acquired the land. Any comment from the county's perspective? I measured my words. We're aware of the project. There are processes for final approval that must be met. Until those are settled, I can't say much. Jim raised an eyebrow, scribbling in his notepad. Might there be a conflict or potential for legal action? My heart hammered. I suppose it's possible, if any laws were broken. Our job is to protect the county's interests. That was all I'd give him. Jim left, somewhat unsatisfied, but it was enough to hint that a deeper story lurked beneath the HOA's polished marketing campaign. After he left, I couldn't stop thinking about how close we were to a public showdown. The time was nearing for me to tighten the noose and reveal the fraud, but I needed just a little more, particularly the testimony from that notary, Seth Lockhart. If he confessed to forging my signature under HOA direction, our case would be unassailable. With that in mind, I finished my coffee and headed out. The crisp wind carried the faint smell of impending rain, and I half smiled at the thought that storms can both wash away sins and unearth them for all to see. The next day, I discreetly contacted Seth Lockhart. My position as county commissioner gave me ways to locate his address, though I used caution, not wanting to spook him. Late in the evening, I drove to a modest ranch-style home on the outskirts of town. The porch light flickered, revealing peeling paint on the shutters. I rapped on the door. After a few tense moments, a weary man in his 50s cracked it open. "Mr. Lockhart?" I asked softly. He nodded, suspicion clouding his eyes. "I'm Mark Wilson," I said, "the rightful owner of the farmland the HOA claims to possess. May I speak with you?" His face paled. "You're—" He swallowed hard. "Look, I can't talk about this. I signed a confidentiality agreement." I gently pressed. "I know you notarized a document with my forged signature. I'm here to give you a chance to tell the truth, or you might face legal consequences later." His eyes darted around. "They, look, I didn't know it was forged at the time. They brought me the papers, said the signature was legitimate, said you couldn't be present, but had authorized them to finalize. Miss Pierce was quite convincing. I just needed the money." He trailed off, shame creeping into his features. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Seth, forging a notary signature is a crime. But if you cooperate, help expose the scheme, you might avoid the worst. Come clean. Tell me who paid you. What exactly happened?" He ran a trembling hand through his hair. "It was Ms. Pierce and one of her board members. They approached me last year, offered me a lump sum to notarize a signature claiming it was yours. I swear, I didn't realize how serious it was. They said you'd given them power of attorney. When I found out it was all shady, it was too late." I nodded slowly. "Will you make a sworn statement? We can protect you if Ms. Pierce retaliates." He hesitated, tears in his eyes. "I have a family. I can't lose everything." I laid a reassuring hand on his arm. "We'll do everything we can. But you can't hide from this. The truth will emerge, and it's better to be on the right side. I promise. I'll advocate for leniency if you cooperate." Finally, he exhaled, shoulders sagging. "Okay, I'll talk. Just tell me what to do." Relief washed over me. "Contact my attorney. Give a formal deposition. We'll add your testimony to the evidence." I pressed a business card into his hand. "Do it soon, before they suspect anything." As I left Seth's porch, the weight of the final missing piece lifted from my mind. With his admission, the forged deeds were indisputably worthless, and Cynthia Pierce's entire operation would collapse. My plan was nearly complete. They'd built 30 mansions on my estate, every foundation paid for with stolen land. Soon, they'd realize the precarious ground they stood on, legal quicksand that would swallow their investment. Driving home, I allowed myself a triumphant grin. For too long, bullies like the Hawthorne Point HOA had terrorized honest people with fines and intimidation. This time, they had targeted the wrong family, and they'd discover that the new county commissioner was far from powerless. With Seth Lockhart's impending deposition in motion, I called Abigail Reyes to share the good news. She was elated, requesting that we schedule his sworn statement as soon as possible. "That might be the last nail in the coffin," she said, her excitement evident. "We can file for an immediate court injunction the moment he testifies." But I still wanted to time this so that the HOA didn't catch wind of our plan prematurely. My trap hinged on them finalizing the mansions, advertising them, maybe even trying to process official occupancy permits or mortgage approvals. If I shut them down too soon, they might claim ignorance or spin the narrative. But if I let them reach the brink of selling these houses, their buyers would demand real proof of ownership, and that was where the forged deeds would blow up in their faces. A week later, I found the perfect excuse to engage with Cynthia Pierce while keeping my identity as the estate owner under wraps. Hawthorne Point HOA had to file for official county inspection of utility lines. As county commissioner, I was obliged to oversee such major developments. So, I scheduled a site visit, making sure Cynthia was there. On a chilly October morning, I arrived at the half-finished development along with a small county inspection team. The new mansions rose up in neat rows, each with symmetrical columns, expansive porches, and meticulously pruned front hedges. From a distance, it almost looked picturesque. Except I knew it was an illegal sprawl. Cynthia greeted us with a gracious smile, as if oblivious to the tension, Commissioner Wilson, welcome. She wore a navy suit, hair swept into an elegant bun. Her tone brimmed with confidence. We're so honored you could personally inspect our progress. We believe this project will greatly enhance the county's housing stock and tax base. I kept my expression neutral. We'll see, I replied coolly. Let's walk through the property and check the compliance reports. She escorted us around, pointing out the brand new water lines, freshly paved roads, and even a private clubhouse under construction. All of this is in alignment with county regulations, of course, Cynthia said. Your predecessors at the office authorized these expansions. Predecessors? So that's how she thought it worked. She believed the old county commissioner had rubber-stamped everything and that I was just continuing his legacy. Little did she know that the old commissioner never saw these plans either. She must have obtained phony approvals or paid someone off. I merely nodded, letting her brag about the exclusive amenities while noting every questionable detail. At the last mansion, a large sign read, Estate 30, open for tours soon. Workers bustled around, installing marble countertops. Cynthia gestured to the sweeping front yard. We're nearly finished. Prospective buyers are lined up. My board is excited about the official grand opening in a few weeks. Her unbridled enthusiasm churned my stomach. And you're confident your ownership of this land is rock solid? I asked, feigning idle curiosity. She blinked, her smile faltering for just a split second. Absolutely. We have all the documentation in order. No doubt about it. Why do you ask? I shrugged, glancing around. Just making sure. Some community members have expressed concerns about farmland being repurposed. My gaze locked on hers. We wouldn't want any surprises. She lifted her chin defiantly. No surprises, Commissioner. Everything is perfectly legitimate. I offered a non-committal smile. Good to hear. Inside, I was practically seething with anticipation. Let them keep playing this game. Soon, they'd discover how thoroughly I'd prepared. The inspection concluded smoothly, at least on the surface. Cynthia sent me off with a courteous farewell, but behind her polished demeanor, I could sense a hint of unease. Perhaps she detected my skepticism. Regardless, the trap was set. Next time we met, the illusions she'd woven would start unraveling at the seams. 2 days later, Seth Lockhart gave his sworn statement at Abigail's office. He testified that Cynthia Pierce and a board member named Roger Baines had paid him $5,000 to notarize the forged deed in absentia, claiming the real Mark Wilson authorized the transfer but couldn't be physically present. He admitted to ignoring red flags, lured by the substantial payment. Abigail called me the moment Seth finished. We have everything, Mark. Lockhart even provided text message screenshots with Pierce discussing the payoff. This is ironclad. A wave of relief and fury collided inside me. Relief that we had the truth pinned down. Fury at how brazen they'd been to commit such a blatant crime. Time to file for the injunction, I told her, and let's finalize the complaint for civil and criminal proceedings. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, the works. That evening, I prepared a press release. I knew the news would be explosive, especially once we served the HOA with official papers. But as part of my plan, I wanted them to believe they still had a sliver of hope, enough to keep them from cutting their losses prematurely, because once the lawsuit became public, no bank would finance these mansions. No buyer would purchase them. The entire house of cards would collapse. I sat at my kitchen table, drafting the statement for local media. My phone dinged with a text from Cousin Bridget. Saw you at the estate with Pierce. You looked calm, but I know you're steaming inside. Proud of you. Let me know if I can help. I smiled. That estate had belonged to our family for generations, and it was comforting to have her support. I typed back, You'll see soon, Bridget. The grand reveal's coming. I promise Grandpa's land will be ours again. Meanwhile, a swirl of social media chatter began. Some local Facebook groups questioned the legitimacy of the mansion project, citing rumored legal issues. Cynthia's supporters posted rebuttals, praising the new community standard. Tensions soared. The next day, we served the lawsuit and injunction request to the HOA's official address. Within hours, Cynthia left me a terse voicemail. "Commissioner Wilson, I just received a shocking legal notice claiming forgery. This must be a misunderstanding. Please call me back. We can resolve this amicably." I let the message sit, ignoring it. She wanted to find a quick fix before it blew up publicly. But I wasn't in the mood for negotiation. Justice needed to run its course. A week later, the hearing for the injunction took place at the Northwood County Courthouse, a century-old stone building perched at the edge of the town square. The chilly air swirled with anticipation as reporters, local residents, and curious onlookers gathered outside. Word had spread that the new county commissioner was embroiled in a land dispute with the powerful Hawthorne Point HOA. Abigail and I arrived early, greeting a few supporters who'd come to witness the spectacle. We stepped into the high-ceilinged courtroom, sunlight streaming through tall windows. The atmosphere hummed with tension. Across the aisle, Cynthia Pierce sat with her legal team, 3 attorneys in sharp suits shuffling papers. She looked pale but defiant, arms folded. The judge, an older man named Judge Harrison, rapped his gavel. "We're here to address claims of forged deeds and unauthorized construction on farmland belonging to Mark Wilson. Let's proceed." Abigail rose, systematically laying out our evidence: the original deed from 1952, Grandpa's will restricting sale, expert analysis that the signature on the HOA's deed was forged, and Lockhart's sworn statement. Each piece was like a stone in a fortress we were building against the HOA's false claims. The judge took meticulous notes, brow creasing at the mention of bribery. When it was the defense's turn, Cynthia's lead attorney tried to spin a tale of clerical errors and good faith purchases, claiming that the HOA was the innocent party. At one point, Cynthia even stood up, her voice trembling. "We believed we had legal rights to develop that land. We invested millions for the sake of the county's growth. We never intended to defraud anyone." Abigail countered with the text messages from Lockhart, referencing payments and hush agreements. The evidence glowed like a neon sign in the dim courtroom. This wasn't an accidental oversight. It was a deliberate conspiracy to steal valuable farmland and erect mansions for profit, she declared, voice ringing with conviction. I sat silently, fists clenched. The judge asked me directly, "Commissioner Wilson, did you knowingly sign or authorize any deed transferring your estate?" I lifted my head. "No, Your Honor. I have never at any point consented to relinquish that land. It was my grandparents' legacy, and these individuals have desecrated it through fraud and deception." A hush fell over the room. The judge cleared his throat. "Based on the presented evidence, I am inclined to grant the plaintiff's request for an injunction, halting all construction and sales until the matter is fully resolved. Furthermore, criminal charges may be pursued pending further investigation. Ms. Pierce, your HOA lacks valid title to this land." The impact was immediate. Cynthia's mouth fell open. Her lawyers exchanged frantic looks. A ripple of hushed excitement spread among spectators. Reporters scribbled notes with feverish intensity. The gavel struck, finalizing the ruling that effectively stripped Hawthorne Point HOA of any claim to the estate and barred them from completing or selling the mansions. Outside, a mob of cameras swarmed. I kept my statements brief. "I'm grateful the court recognized the truth. We will always defend the law and my family's legacy." Cynthia tried to maneuver past the journalists, but they surrounded her with flashing lights and pointed questions about the alleged forgery. She glared at me across the crowd, eyes brimming with anger and, perhaps, fear. In that moment, I felt a surge of vindication, tempered by sadness at the orchard's destruction. My grandparents never wanted anyone to suffer, but wrongdoing had to be punished, and I was determined to see it through. The next few days brought a whirlwind of consequences. Hawthorne Point HOA's board went into emergency meetings while their lawyers scrambled for damage control. The local news ran nightly segments detailing the scandal. The Hogan escaped 30 mansions on stolen land. County Commissioner exposes fraud. Public outcry soared, with many longtime residents outraged at the destruction of farmland and the brazen forgery. Real estate investors who had financed the mansion project panicked. Construction halted, crews were laid off, the half-completed estates stood eerily silent, their opulent promises undone by the harsh light of truth. Potential buyers vanished, banks withdrew mortgage offers. The entire fiasco became a cautionary tale whispered in coffee shops and union halls about the perils of greed. As for Cynthia Pierce, she resigned from her position as HOA president under immense pressure. Rumors suggested she faced possible criminal charges for orchestrating the forgery. Some board members tried to distance themselves, claiming ignorance, but the depositions pointed to deeper collusion. Roger Baines, who was indicted alongside Pierce, reportedly considered a plea deal to reduce his sentence. On a personal level, I finally felt able to walk the estate without that clawing sense of anger. Much of the orchard was gone, replaced by large frameworks of luxury homes that would likely be torn down or remain unsold for years. But the land still held a quiet dignity, as if waiting for a chance to heal and regrow. I planned to replant sections of orchard trees, maybe set up a family-run orchard stand. My grandparents' legacy would live on, even if it required years of restoration. One late afternoon, as golden sunlight bathed the deserted construction site, Bridget and I strolled across the property, remembering childhood moments, apple picking, picnics, and Grandpa's booming laugh. "I'm so sorry this happened," she murmured, gazing at the half-finished mansions, "but I'm proud of how you handled it." I placed an arm around her shoulders. Grandpa always said, when folks do wrong, it catches up to them sooner or later. Just make sure you're standing straight when it does. I guess that turned out right. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "He'd be proud of you, Mark. That's for sure." Over the following weeks, the county took official steps to revoke any illegitimate permits tied to the mansion project. I recused myself from certain votes to avoid conflicts of interest, but my colleagues unanimously agreed that no valid license existed. The State Attorney General's office launched a formal investigation into Hawthorne Point HOA's dealings, uncovering a web of inflated fines, misappropriated fees, and intimidation tactics that targeted older residents. The board's reputation lay in ruins. Lawsuits from scorned homeowners piled up. Meanwhile, I made good on my vow to restore the farmland. Volunteers from the local high school and environmental clubs helped me clear debris from the orchard. We salvaged any remaining trees, nurtured them, and began replanting new saplings. The county's agricultural extension office offered support, donating heritage apple and pear seedlings. It was a bittersweet process, knowing how much had been lost, yet feeling the spark of life returning. One Saturday, mid-restoration, a group of neighbors arrived unannounced with shovels, wheelbarrows, and a huge banner reading, "Northward County stands with you." They said they wanted to help restore the orchard as a symbol of community solidarity. I was deeply touched. My role as county commissioner had always been about serving people, but this was the first time I truly felt the community rally behind me in such a personal way. We worked side by side, tearing down half-finished walls of the nearest mansion to reclaim the soil. With each slam of the sledgehammer, I felt the frustration and anguish melt away, replaced by a sense of solidarity and hope. By dusk, the site looked more like farmland than a construction zone. Dirt streaked our faces and sweat drenched our clothes, but everyone wore smiles, confident that the orchard would thrive again. Eventually, the legal battles concluded. Cynthia Pierce was convicted of multiple counts, including fraud and conspiracy. She faced a heavy fine and possible jail time. The court ordered Hawthorne Point HOA to pay restitution to me and to dismantle the illegally built mansions. The entire ordeal became a cautionary saga for other HOAs in the region, a testament that no one was above the law. Local news outlets praised me for turning the tables, sometimes referring to the fiasco as Commissioner Wilson's trap, the dramatic story of how an overreaching HOA walked blindly into a legal minefield. In truth, it wasn't about me setting a trap just for the sake of vengeance. It was about quietly gathering undeniable proof, giving the culprits enough rope to hang themselves, and ensuring the land's rightful legacy was restored. On a crisp fall morning 1 year after the scandal, I invited townspeople to a celebratory event, the grand reopening of the Wilson family orchard. We held a modest ceremony near a newly erected wooden archway. Local school children performed a short skit about the importance of farmland. Neighbors browsed stalls selling homemade cider and apple pies from the first small harvest of the newly replanted trees. In a touching moment, I unveiled a plaque honoring my grandparents' memory and the orchard's historic significance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with orange and pink, I gazed out across the orchard. The day's laughter and camaraderie echoed in my mind. Standing there, I recalled all the chaos, the half-built mansions, the forged papers, the anxious nights of research, and I felt a profound sense of closure. Justice had been served, the land was ours again, and the orchard was on its way to healing. Cousin Bridget sidled up, offering me a cup of warm cider. "You did it," she murmured, looking out at the trees. "We all did," I corrected, sipping the sweet brew. The orchard smelled of fresh earth and young blossoms, a far cry from the dust and noise of construction. I turned toward the flickering lights of Northwood County in the distance. Here's to new beginnings, and to making sure no one ever tries a stunt like that again. A soft breeze rustled the newly planted saplings, their leaves shimmering in the fading light. They'd built 30 mansions on my family estate, convinced they'd profit from stolen land. Instead, they found out, far too late, that I was the county commissioner, the one person with the power and evidence to undo their entire scheme. This orchard would forever stand as a reminder that sooner or later, truth and justice prevail.